and Donald Trump has posted online about moving to nuclear submarines to be nearer to Russia.
A threat was made and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people.
President Trump says he's ordered the deployment of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines to the appropriate regions in response to threats from the former Russian president Dmitry Medvedev.
6 red blips lit up on the radar. Mach 2.6, sea skimming, and deadly. At that moment, the USS Arleigh Burke had seconds to decide, intercept or risk a hit valued in hundreds of millions. Venezuela had unleashed its Onyx missiles from shore, knowing even one getting through could cripple a $2 billion destroyer. For the sailors inside the Combat Information Center, this wasn't theory, it was survival. What would you do when every second counts and the screen in front of you shows death racing in fast? Comment your answer below. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great! Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
President Trump issuing new warnings to Russia and repositioning 2 U.S. nuclear submarines after what he calls highly provocative statements by Russia's former president.
We know when there's Russians underway at all times. We track that very, very closely.
Mr. Medvedev reminded President Trump that Russia possessed nuclear strike capabilities. It's not clear exactly where Mr. Trump has ordered the submarines to be deployed. Here's our North America correspondent, David Willis.
6 radar traces burned onto the screen, each one slashing toward the gray hull at Mach 2.6. Every dot carried the weight of $1 billion nightmare. In the Combat Information Center, sailors stared at the glass, listening to the hum of electronics and the clipped voices of controllers. The question over their heads was simple but brutal: engage early, or hold fire and risk impact seconds later. Venezuela had worked hard to set the stage. Its coastal defense forces had dragged Bastion P launchers into position along the shoreline, concealment under camouflage nets and gullies, waiting for the moment to fire. Those launchers carried the Onyx missile, long, sleek, and built to hammer warships. By pushing them out into busy shipping lanes, Caracas wasn't just firing at an American destroyer. They were firing across the same waters where civilian tankers, freighters, and fishing boats layered the sea. That was the gamble. A hostile shot fired inside dense maritime traffic made intercepts messy, but it also gave them the thin shadow of cover. Inside the Arleigh Burke CIC, that gamble didn't matter. What mattered was the clock. Every officer and every enlisted sailor in the room had their role rehearsed, repeated, drilled. But drills ended when those 6 fast, closing arrows showed up at range. Routine console watching shifted into survival math. Angle, speed, probability. Those screens turned from glowing data feeds into the difference between the ship staying afloat or breaking apart in flames.
Russia, I think it's disgusting what they do. I think it's disgusting.
The men have been taunting each other after the White House this week said Russia had 10 days to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine or face tough sanctions.
The Onyx carried a warhead in the 200-kilogram range, heavy enough to snap the spine of a modern frigate, catastrophic if it punched unopposed into a destroyer. Worse still was its flight behavior. Unlike older missiles that arced visibly, these hugged the sea surface, riding just meters above the waves. In radar terms, they blended with the horizon, forcing sensors to separate steel from surf. That meant defenders had less warning, shorter engagement envelopes, and only fractions of minutes to line up interceptors. Speed stacked the threat. At Mach 2.6, 100 kilometers vanished in under 3 minutes. Against that, the ship carried its most valuable shield, the Aegis system. Linked to spy radar arrays rotating high above the deck, Aegis didn't just see a contact, it plotted where that contact would be a moment from now, then another, then another. Imagine trying to block arrows with a shield not held in hand but moving of its own accord, anticipating the shot. Each Onyx was a steel arrow screaming low, but the Aegis grid raised a shield that had to flex, adjust, and lock its angle in real time, never pausing. The tactical picture tightened with distance calls, 300 kilometers inbound, then 200, then 150. The operators marked the counts with controlled voices, but the weight behind them hung in the air. Each drop in range meant one less breath between decision and impact. Launch too soon with interceptors and you might see missiles weave clear, the defense wasted. Launch too late and the ship became a target at point blank. Layered defense became the doctrine. Command authorized multiple intercepts, a wall put in place rather than a single shot. Missile interceptors arced up and out, tracked by watchstanders whose hands were steady only because they knew nerves killed accuracy. A salvo of standard interceptors raced skyward, radar beams stitched across the ocean, tracking the supersonic intruders. Seconds ticked like hammer blows as both sides' machines fought in invisible arcs through the air. One Onyx broke through the first layer, then met a second wave of defensive fire and blossomed into fragments over the sea. Another tried to see, skimming weave, rising briefly, then falling back into the ocean after losing stability. One by one, the blips winked out from the displays until silence, broken only by static from headsets and the low complaint of cooling fans, filled the room. The destroyer had survived. Not one warhead reached its hull. That victory wasn't about luck. It was about discipline, layers of defense, and sailors who executed drills with calm precision when chaos came racing over the horizon. A $2 billion asset, and the hundreds of lives inside it, stood intact because seconds had been mastered rather than wasted. But the ledger of combat is never one-sided. While the American crew exhaled behind dim red lights, another ship was still on the surface, Venezuelan steel, bristling with weapons, targeted now because its gamble had failed. One misjudged move had set it in the crosshairs, and the payback was about to begin. Speed alone didn't win. Precision did. In that clash, America showed how seconds, not sheer firepower, decide who survives on the water. Every intercept, every voice command, was proof that discipline beats reckless audacity. Now put yourself there. 6 hostile warheads inbound and an entire ship under your care. Do you strike early and risk wasting your best shots, or hold and gamble everything on timing? What would you do, risk or restraint? Comment your choice below. Subscribe and join a community that seeks to understand the real face of modern conflict, where survival is written in moments, not minutes.